À-bas-le-ciel.
Well, look, okay, so I think you raised two interesting questions here. The third point you made is really just the difference between early adopters versus who will be the adopters when it's a mature movement. But part of the problem is we don't know who else will adopt it. I mean, maybe because again, I'm open to this. I've just made this video saying I am not left wing, but once we're past the early adopters phase, maybe veganism is going to be even more left wing. Like maybe, because I mean, historically, veganism and animal rights have been received very poorly by the traditional labor left. It has been very hostile to veganism and animal rights. It has had no positive. But okay, maybe in the year 2040, veganism has taken that over and vice versa. Because I mean, the labor unions are falling apart anyway. Maybe so. Like maybe the left wing of the Democrat Party in the U.S. and in Canada, the NDP. Maybe those have really become majority vegan. Like that's one possible future. So I can talk about the difference between early adopters and when it's a robust movement, but I don't really know. Like it would also be a false assumption for me to assume that veganism is going to cluster around the middle of the political spectrum. It could just continue to grow to the left.
À-bas-le-ciel.
Hey guys, just a short clarification. This is actually the third video on this channel of myself speaking with a lawyer based in Washington, D.C. called Stephen Feit. The first video is over an hour long. You can still dial back and see that one. Great discussion worth seeing. The second video I just uploaded a few days ago is an excerpt from a podcast that's 1 hour and 40 minutes long. You can get that podcast from Patreon. Click on the link below this channel and pay $1 per month to support the creation of content of this kind and support my survival out here in Yunnan, China, on the border with Myanmar. But look, just to avoid any confusion, this is actually the third video in total that I've uploaded, a dialogue between me and this particular fellow, and it is the second and final excerpt that I'm uploading to YouTube. But if you click on Patreon, you get to hear the whole conversation in all its unedited glory. Yeah, it's terrifying. And I mean, this comes back to the reckless optimism you're talking about earlier that you sometimes see vegans expressing, that somehow the whole world is going to become vegan. I'm familiar with that kind of misplaced optimism because it happened. It happened actually both with Buddhism in the Western world, so the Western adoption of Buddhism, and it happened just before that with the Western adoption of Hinduism. There was a time back when the Beatles, so this is the rock band, the top 10 rock band, back when the Beatles briefly became Hindu, there was this wave of optimism that suddenly a certain form of dumbed down, westernized, translated into English Hinduism was going to become massively influential in the Western world. And not without reason. Like if you just look at the percentage growth per year, year on year, you had a couple years in a row there where these Hindu foundations in California and in New York were growing very rapidly in their number of adherents, and they were being on, the cover of newspapers and magazines and much talked about. They suddenly had a high profile, and they also suddenly had a lot of money. And in many ways, Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism is mostly what I'm talking about here. No, I'm not actually, Zen Buddhism is a slightly different history. But Theravada Buddhism especially very much tried to reproduce this wave. And there was a time you can even look at Buddhist publications from the 1980s that are really optimistically talking about Buddhism as exploding in America and in Canada, that suddenly like millions of white people are going to be practicing Buddhists. Now, it never happened. It's not just possible that veganism will similarly collapse that way, that it'll have its day being on the front page of the newspaper and then fade. We're in much greater danger of that because, among other things, we don't have the money. Those Hindu foundations, a lot of them are shameful, but they got millions of dollars and they built universities within the United States and around the world. They built bricks and mortar big institutions. They built temples, but there was real money involved, and where there's money, there's a certain kind of institutional durability. I don't see that happening in veganism at all. And, the possibility of veganism receding to being a shadow of the level of influence it has right now, however small the influence be, that's very, very real to me.
I have one more thing to be pessimistic about. No, I think that's, in truth, I think that's a really valid concern. I guess this is with no claims of effective activism or anything. I have no evidence to support this. I just, given the what is the statistic? Something like 86% of people who go vegan end up reverting back to a non-vegan lifestyle.
Right.
I have to believe that I do believe that is in large part due to just the social and logistical difficulty of maintaining that lifestyle. Yeah. Just that I'm sure there is a component of that is people truly are just like, I don't want to say addicted, but you know what I mean? Like they can't shake the craving for animal foods, or they can't deal with the social pressure. Even if there are vegan options at Chipotle, they still feel like they're being made fun of. I'm sure that's part of it, but
I mean, I'll add on my I'm going to interrupt you in mid-sentence here. I think this is the other sense in which I really want to talk about community, not a Facebook group, but real community in the real world. There's this other big element of moral suasion. So you and I both are Jewish to some extent. You can have people who are involved with Judaism because they're positively motivated to be part of the community, right? And you can also have people who adhere to the religious laws of Judaism, maybe even rules they don't particularly respect, particular customs, particular religious observances, because of the moral suasion of the community, because they don't want to be excluded from the community. They don't want to be punished or looked down upon by the community, right? So to be blunt, there's both the sense of wanting to be part of a Jewish community that actually exists, that is not a Facebook group, and there's also an aversion to being perceived as a bad Jew by one's fellow Jews, right? And that's heavy. That's a heavy trip. I mean, for a lot of people, whether you've seen that in a family dispute or something else, to have the guilt trip put on somebody that they're letting the group down, Now, on a microcosmic level, you see that, because I really do think this is part of the statistic. Whether the statistic is 86% or whatever, a very, very large number of vegans cease being vegan. I know a lot of vegan women, including some of the vegan women who try to start relationships with me, who have men in their lives who drag their feet and only become vegan because their girlfriend insists on it or because their wife insists on it, right? So after they break up, why would that man be vegan anymore? You see? Now, again, if someone converted to Judaism only because they married a Jewish woman, and I actually have known some examples of that, well, then if you get divorced, what kind of moral suasion is on you, either positively or negatively? So now look, I got to put in a footnote here. I'm not saying this because I want to trick people into veganism who don't really want to be vegan. I think that's ridiculous. But if we're trying to understand a number like that and the durability of veganism as a movement, I do think that a very significant percentage of those people, yes, the difficulty of remaining vegan is one thing, but I do think the absence of community in that sense, it is both chicken and egg. It's both that people are getting a vegan girlfriend and then going back to eating meat when they break up with that girlfriend, and also that they don't have any of that push or pull of being engaged in a community to make them feel so that they would feel bad if they became a bad vegan, or where they positively want to be vegan because they want to be part of the movement that we've got going on, And people make sacrifices. People make sacrifices just to be part of the Green Party. The Green Party is not nearly as rewarding as being part of a Jewish community center or something. Being Jewish is not that great, but you get to go to some picnics. You get to go to some events. So yeah, I've seen that definitely. Even just with something as pathetic as the Green Party, that you have a little bit of a community there, and you get that type of change in people's motives and behavior. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's totally right. And I don't want to make it sound too transactional, but in a real blunt way, like when you go vegan, what do you get?
Yeah.
Do you get
I know.
Do you get, you know, do you get friends? Do you get a place to spend your afternoons or evenings or your weekends? Do you get, do you get any kind of social capital, any career advancement opportunities? I mean, these are things that in even with relatively loose ties to a Jewish community, you just walk into a Jewish community center or a temple, and it's all there for you. They have on the website, like, do you want friends? Are you single? Are you looking to date people? Do you need a job? Do you want to volunteer? It's all there.
I know.
And I think the important thing too to stress is I think that there is obviously there's a blurriness here, but like there's a degree to which all of the things we're talking about, building a community, in a lot of ways, obviously if you're, vegan restaurants serve vegan food, but they don't really have anything to do with veganism, or they have less to do with veganism, and they're just about the people who are vegans.
Yes.
And I think that's
right.
I think there's also like a crypto version of this there are these weird clusters of personality traits or points of interest. You've raised the issue of mental health and eating disorders. There's also just sort of this, anarchist, anti-establishment, anti-capitalist sort of strain that runs through it. And I'm really quite conflicted because I don't know, my instinct is not to do this, but I don't know if it makes sense. Should we be really building institutions in our population that cater to these desires? Should we have the vegan anti-GMO lobbying group? Because not because GMOs have anything to do with veganism, but just because vegans seem to hate GMOs. I also feel pretty strongly that, and I haven't thought this through that much, but I find the kind of people, and maybe it's just the most vocal people, the people on YouTube and the people who post in the Facebook groups, the folks who are attracted to veganism are, I don't know what ties them all together, but it seems like it's not, maybe this is wrong. Well, I'll just say it and you can be like, well, no, you're totally wrong. But it seems like it's not just average people. Like if you took a cross-section of the vegan population, you wouldn't have the demographic and personality profiles of like the average whatever group of people you're looking at. It seems like there is a lot of this sort of fringe looking for new lifestyles kind of thing. So for me, I live in a really weird place where in the vegan population, I'm probably among the most mainstream and little c conservative. I'm certainly on that end of the spectrum. And then compared to like the population of even a super progressive city like DC, I'm quite far to the left.
Well, look, okay, so I think you raised two interesting questions here. The third point you made is really just the difference between early adopters versus who will be the adopters when it's a mature movement. But part of the problem is we don't know who else will adopt it. I mean, maybe, because again, I'm open to this. I've just made this video saying I am not left wing. But once we're past the early adopters phase, maybe veganism is going to be even more left wing. Like maybe, because I mean, historically, veganism and animal rights have been received very poorly by the traditional labor left. It has been very hostile to veganism and animal rights. It's had no positive. But okay, maybe in the year 2040, veganism has taken that over and vice versa. Because I mean, the labor unions are falling apart anyway. Maybe. So like maybe the left wing of the Democrat Party in the US and in Canada, the NDP, maybe those have really become majority vegan. Like that's one possible future. So I can talk about the difference between early adopters and when it's a robust movement, but I don't really know. Like it would also be a false assumption for me to assume that veganism is going to cluster around the middle of the political spectrum. It could just continue to grow to the left. That's not even hard to imagine. That's not that implausible. Before you were asking, so the fact that we can criticize the cross-section of vegans we've got now as merely being early adopters, that's very true and very useful, but that doesn't mean we can guess which way the future goes. I've challenged people repeatedly by saying, look, you think you know the future of veganism, but you're not even thinking about the Hindus. You're not even thinking about the Buddhists. And I do think those are really significant skewing factors. So those are just two examples. But maybe the clothing industry, maybe there's something I'm not thinking about. The dynamic role, the veganism in the clothing industry. We were just talking about restaurants, but we don't talk about the clothing industry so much. The clothing industry certainly has the money and clout and organization to have a big impact if they want to. You know what I mean? So you could have leadership from an unforeseen position that has those again skewing factors for the progress of things. You asked a question that I'm really well prepared for because of my experience with the Green Party. You asked, look, when you join veganism, what do you get? It's a crucial problem. And I can remember saying that directly to the Green Party of Canada and the leadership not being able to answer. I said, look, people sign up and they actually pay money to join the Green Party. And what do you get? Let's actually draw a flow chart. I was seriously challenged to say, no, you have to think through step by step. Because the reality is people are walking up and paying $30. It's a significant amount of money, and their money goes into a hole and it disappears and they get nothing. Or they get a button that says I joined the Green Party and nothing else. And they never hear back from you again for 4 years until the next election. So let's actually do a flow chart of what do you get when you join. And certainly for a vegan foundation, for an actual organization, you have to look at that very carefully. If people donate money or join, what do you get? In Canada, we have an old saying from, I think, the 1960s. It's possible it's older than that, I knew that, but I would guess it's either 1960s or 1970s, which was, so in Canada, we have 3 main parties instead of just 2 in the United States. This is the saying: people join the Conservative Party to get drunk, they join the Liberal Party to get laid, and they join the NDP to get pamphlets. And there used to really be some truth to that. You were talking about, the social elements, or the social elements of going to a Jewish temple or, joining a mainstream party like the Conservative Party. There definitely was a tradition in small towns in Canada. If you were looking for a job, going to Conservative Party meetings was a good way to meet employers or people you could be in business with or what have you. There was really that was a crucial form of social capital. I don't know if that's true today. I just don't know. But certainly in the 1970s, that was really, really true, a reason to be involved in a political party. And there really was something you would get. You would actually go and get drunk and meet, maybe meet your future wife, maybe meet your future boss or business colleague. And the joke there implicitly is that the most left-wing party is lacking these things. That if you join the left-wing party, all you get are pamphlets. You don't get drunk, you don't get laid, you don't get any other social capital. When you're looking at these kinds of social movements in a dynamic period of growth, which is what we think veganism is in, the other question is, are you going to cater to vegans as they are or to vegans as they should be? And that may sound like an academic point, but it's not. It's not academic at all. If you're in the Green Party and you have only a couple hundred people involved, like in Canada, it's a couple hundred people. Are you going to write articles and produce material and politically campaign in a way that reaches out and rewards those few hundred people, makes them happy? Like you were saying before, like, okay, maybe it's hysteria over genetically modified organisms. It could be anything. Some particular issue that really shouldn't be in your mandate. Or you say, no, this is not what the Green Party is about. The Green Party is supposed to be serving a larger function, a higher ideal. We're supposed to have this mission that serves everybody in Canada, that serves some long-term goal that may be defined scientifically and socially, but it is partly scientific when you're talking about ecology. We have this mandate that actually has nothing to do with the couple hundred losers who just happen to be the fringe elements who signed up when we were first getting started, right? And you can even be in a situation where you have contempt for your current supporters on behalf of the people you're imagining as being your future supporters. I think all kinds of organizations go through that. you could even just be having some kind of a public service. If you're doing a library, or actually, we also have a tradition of library trucks, a truck that goes around bringing books to a community. Well, do you actually provide the books that people want to read, or do you provide the books that they should read? There's a problem with prison libraries. Are you there to provide a certain quality and caliber of book, or just the books that actually get asked for? So yeah, that tension I think is fundamental, and I just feel well rehearsed for it because of that background I have.
That's interesting. And again, I don't want to be too harsh on all our fellow vegans. I mean, I'm happy to criticize them for lots of things, but not for being who they are. Yeah. It's just they don't realize that if our goal is to bring more people into our movement, if we call it a movement, necessarily we're going to dilute so that we're not all politically aligned. We're not all culturally aligned. We may really have visceral hatred for the beliefs of other vegans. I mean, I think it's really easy to imagine, right? Right now, I think there some overwhelming majority of vegans, at least the ones that I've been exposed to and spoken to, are pro-choice when it comes to abortion, right? And one could imagine a situation where some connection is made between pro-life, anti-abortion arguments and the sentience of animals. I'm not suggesting that it will happen, but it's...
Yeah, I've seen those. You're right. That exists. That debate exists. It does already exist. Yes, you're quite correct. Go on, yeah.
But yeah, and just one could imagine the ranks of veganism swelling aggressively with folks who are staunchly pro-life. Yes. And that being a real conflict. And like, I think we have to say, if this is the movement, if we want to turn this into a movement, if we want to grow it, like, that's what we have to want, is to bring people in who aren't just like us.
À-bas-le-ciel.